Over the past 3 days, I've been trying to answer the simple question, why is the British tabloid press obsessed with Harry and Meghan's children? And I call it a simple question because the answer is very simple, and it is Meghan. However, that answer is way too simple for a lot of people, which is how we ended up with a 3-part series that nobody asked for. And I'm sorry to have to do this to you again, but it's actually a 4-part series. But don't worry, you've probably already watched the first one, and it's where I ask the other simple question, why all the comparisons between Meghan and Kate? But in case you haven't watched that video, to briefly summarize here, when Catherine married into the British royal family, she was presented to us, especially in the Commonwealth, the so-called Commonwealth, as the everyday woman who is middle class and isn't noble and therefore isn't royalist and therefore is totally, completely relatable. She was meant to be our avatar into the royal family. She was supposed to be like the new kind of Diana, but not really, because she's actually one of you. In a similar way to how before Barack Obama, Bill Clinton was kind of touted as the first Black president in America. And this worked in many ways to kind of modernize the royal family without actually modernizing them. But we were now looking at them with kind of maybe a different eye. And then enter Meghan. As opposed to Catherine, Meghan actually is middle class. She had to apply to scholarships to even go to university. She was raised by a single mom. She came from a broken home, so to speak. And most importantly, Meghan had Diana tendencies, if I can put it that way. So after all these years of having Bill Clinton being the representative for Black people in the highest office in the land, we suddenly got a Barack Obama. And that was not good, because by simply showing up, by simply being herself, Meghan was already usurping Kate's position as like the representative of the Commonwealth. Because when Meghan showed up, we recognized her in a way that we hadn't recognized Catherine. We had been told that Catherine was one of us, but when Meghan showed up, we didn't have to be told. All we had to do was something search her, and we found out, oh, she actually is one of us. And now I'm going to do something that is very out of character for me and ask you to please take a step back from viewing these women as full people. Because remember, we're discussing them in the context of having married into a 1,000-year-old dynasty, an anachronistic institution that has no business existing in the modern age. And by the rules of this kind of institution, these women are not complete people until they give us something valuable. And in their case, the something valuable comes in the form of heirs, i.e. their children. In Catherine's case, she was supposed to give us our first so-called commoner prince. But then Meghan showed up and usurped all of that. And now any commoner princelings that we were going to get from Catherine were not going to be the only ones. Which is why, allegedly, so derangers, when you try to report me to TikTok, remember I said this part, allegedly. When Meghan was pregnant with her firstborn child, Archie, there were worries from senior members of the royal family about his complexion. I'm aware that a lot of people look at that and, see it as an instance of like pure racism where, you just kind of hate somebody for the color of their skin. But I don't see it that way. I mean, yeah, there was a lot of racism going on, but I think the primary reason there were worries about Archie's complexion is that in the same way that Meghan just had to show up to usurp Kate, Archie just had to be born to usurp George. Like by simply being born, Archie already had the Commonwealth, so to speak. And while I disagree fundamentally with their reasoning and overall way of thinking, the royal family is correct in their ultimate conclusion, i.e. Archie does have the Commonwealth. And not just Archie, but his sister as well, Lily. For example, every single year on these children's birthdays, there is a grassroots global community that donates thousands of American dollars to initiatives that work with at-risk youth, children affected by HIV/AIDS, areas that don't have clean water or sanitation, etc. They are known as the Sussex Squad, and over the last 6 years, they've helped raise over $1.2 million American to all of these initiatives. And to put that into perspective, this is just a group of ordinary people like you and me who've taken it upon themselves to not only defend and advocate for these children, they are taking it even further by just showing up and doing good in these children's names. And when I say this is a global community, I'm not just being facetious. The people involved in the Sussex Squad, they come from everywhere in the world, from Haiti to Jamaica to Kenya to South Africa. I'm South African, by the way, to Canada, to the USA, to the United Kingdom. And both the royal family and the press have started noticing. But where it gets particularly disturbing, at least to me, is that that's not the only thing they've noticed. Remember back in video 1 when I told you the press has already started wondering if they can generate any revenue from the children of Harry and Meghan? Well, they've already started kind of analyzing the economic markers associated with these children. And not just these children, but George and his siblings as well. For example, every single time Meghan wears an accessory or piece of clothing, it sells out within 24 hours. There's even a name for it. It's called the Meghan effect. The same can be said about her children. Every single time she posts them on Instagram, whatever they're wearing sells out within the next 24 hours. But here's the weird part. Every time the press reports about all of these selling outs of clothes, they somehow find a way to link it back to George and his siblings. Take this pair of pajamas that Archie wore, right? Just first of all, how it's reported is also kind of like really shady because it tries to remove Archie from the narrative of having had any impact on the pajamas selling out. That's thing number one. Thing number two is that way down in the article, the story somehow turns into like, oh, remember when George wore like this thing and then it sold out? And just to put that into perspective, Archie is currently 6 years old. George is 12 years old. So there is a 6-year gap between these kids. And somehow the press tries to write about them as though they are peers and competing in the same kind of, pool. But to be quite honest with you, I kind of don't care about all of that. It's the other stuff that really disturbs me. For example, recently Harry went to the United Kingdom. After he left the United Kingdom, Tom Sykes, a Royal Rota journalist, put out a story about Harry putting Archie's name down at Eton College so that Archie can go and attend Eton College. For those of you who don't know, Eton College is a high school and the kids who go there are 13 to 18 years old. But the press is writing about a 6-year-old being put down for a high school. Why? Lucky for you, I'm all up in these people's business, right? Because I immediately realized George is 12 years old. He is at an age where he should start thinking about going to Eton or not. Which brings me all the way back to video 1, where we talked about search engine optimization and how the press uses Meghan to write about Catherine and all the other royals. Well, it turns out they're now using Archie to write about George. And that is incredibly disturbing for a lot of reasons, chief among which is the fact that just because the British tabloid press can generate a lot of money from using you as their subject doesn't mean they're going to be nice. In fact, when Archie was still an infant leaving the hospital immediately after being born, one of the people who worked for the BBC depicted this child as a chimpanzee. There are multiple people in prison who got there because they threatened the life of this child and his mom and his dad, specifically because his dad is a race traitor and married an N-word. And they think Archie is an abomination that needs to be exterminated. And they didn't get there by themselves. Like, the ideology these people hold is not removed from how the press covers Meghan and her children. In fact, there's a whole bunch of people currently who don't even believe that Meghan was ever pregnant, who believe that Archie doesn't exist and is a paid actor. Not only are they seeking to unmask this child, but they actively wish harm for him. And even if they don't want to actively harm him, in the same way that the press created this incessant demand for Princess Diana's pictures, such that the paparazzi felt entitled to chase her into a tunnel where she sadly passed away, in the same way that they've created this incessant demand to consume these people like products, they are doing the same with Meghan's children. And here's the thing with that. It doesn't matter if you personally can tell that these kids have a black biracial parent. The fact that people know they have that parent is enough to place them in danger.